The village of Carnlough lies at the foot of Carnlough, one of the 9 glens of Antrim which today remains relatively unspoilt, except for the scars on the hillside created by the old limestone quarries, a remnant of its industrial past. The harbour we see today was built in 1853 by the Marchioness of Londonderry. However, the first harbour was built in the late 1700s by a local landowner named Philip Gibbons. It was a stone pier 200 feet long which could accommodate ships up to 20 tons and was used for the export of potatoes, grain and limestone and the importation of coal. In 1834, the Marchioness of Londonderry, Frances Anne Van Tempest, inherited the Carnlough estate from her mother, Anne Catherine MacDonald, Countess of Antrim. Frances Anne subsequently bought further land belonging to the Gibbons family, and along with her husband, the third Marquess, she pioneered the construction of the new harbour, which included a road bridge and a 1.5 mineral railway line to the quarry, which overlooks the village. The man responsible for the building of the harbour and the bridges across High Street and Herbert Street was Patrick Mahan, a local stonemason. By August 1854, the work had been completed, allowing uninterrupted passageway to the harbour, and soon the first cargo of limestone left the new pier for Scotland. Some work still needed to be done to remove a solid rock band across the harbour entrance, and when this was completed, the limestone industry in Carnlough experienced something like a boom. Although the burning of limestone had been carried out in Carnlough for hundreds of years to spread on the fields as fertiliser, it was Richard Wilson who became the Marchioness of Londonderry's agent in 1850, who saw its great commercial possibilities. The Marchioness saw the same possibilities, and in 1856 work began on erecting large lime kilns on the Waterfall Road, and lime burning began in 1857. Over the years, the Carnlough Lime Company provided much needed employment to the area. Fortunes, however, were to fluctuate and demand decline. A dispute in 1945 regarding working conditions saw the employees paid off and the work closed. The dispute lasted some months before the company reopened again, but the signs were ominous, and by 1963 the quarry ceased production and the workers paid off. Some hope was brought to the area for a while with the takeover of the limeworks by Mr. Paddy Mulvenna, the owner of the successful engineering businesses in Belfast and Ballyclare. However, the early optimism was diminished when it was learned that the takeover was not going to be financially viable, and around 1965 the limeworks in Carnlough ceased after well over a century in business. Today few traces remain of that industrial past, but I had the privilege to have some of those who worked there share their memories of that time with me. And this all came about because of a whistle. Brian Black, ex-primary school teacher in Carnlough here, phoned me up one day to say this gentleman that worked up in the quarry had a whistle and he wanted to donate it to the Shane Museum, which seems slightly bizarre to me because it belongs to Carnlough. But anyway, I take everything, came down, saw Brian, and he introduced me to John McNeill. John McNeill was one of the last quarrymen up in the limestone quarries up above Carnlough, and he had us up until 1962, wasn't it? So this was John's. How many years had you that, John?
15 years.
And what was the purpose of it?
To warn the people that the blasting was going to take place. You know, there were people knew when they heard the whistle,
yeah,
where there's blasting going to take place.
Would you like to see how it plays?
Very loud.
So then the charges went off, and that was your main duty. Then what happened to the limestone that came down?
Well, the limestone came down then, the digger went in and they filled it into dumpers.
Yeah.
I went from the dumpers up to the crusher, dumped into the crusher, crushed and went up conveyor belts into the storage belts.
Right.
And that was the start of the journey from that down to Whiteman Mill,
No.
down the railway.
Yeah. And then what happened then?
There were three empty wagons went up, and three foreigners coming down.
Right.
And there was a boy went down, I haven't done it many times, he went down in the full wagons, halfway, and he jumped off to change the points.
Right.
The empty wagons coming up.
Yeah, right.
And if you're slipping enough, you run after the empty wagons, you jump and take it back up again.
And what happened when you missed the
But
jump?
you just did it.
You said sometimes the ropes broke.
Oh, and the ropes broke. Oh, aye. The ropes broke one time. I was on the three wagons too, coming up, and the wagon stopped. And I says, that's funny, it's stopping here. And I looked, and the wagons down below were still going, 12 wagons. So I got off and up the hill as far as I could go. There'd been a bit of the rope had been jointed, and it stuck in one of the points, and it held empty wagons for a wee while.
Oh, yeah.
And then when it pulled out the way, the empty wagons went down, and the rope flying into there. Oh, dangerous.
Well, then, those wagons, what happened? They went down to the crushing mill, did they?
They did, aye.
And what was the purpose of the crushing mill?
Well, they were grinding up the limestone into grit, into dust. And it was bagged and it was sent away, and the boats.
At that point, did they take the flint out of it?
They did. And that's the first job I had, me and my friend, Sean Kelly.
Well, what age were you when you started?
I left school on Friday and I started the quarry on Monday morning, 14.
14. And what about you?
No, I was 16.
You're a senior.
Sean Kelly, you remember Sean Kelly?
Oh, I know Sean. Aye.
Sean started me and him. We were in the same desk at school for 2 years. We never went anywhere because my father had taken a stroke and I wanted a job.
Yeah.
And Sean Kelly was there, and me and him travelled up a year at the Flints, a year doing bits and pieces, filling wagons and all this, a year sledging, stones. And when we were 17, before we were 17, we were brought up in to learn the trade of drilling and blasting. Robert Abram took us a week. He was drilling with Robert for a week and I was sledging. Then we went down back and forward again till we were ready. We had 3 months of that before we were ready to drill and blast. And poor Sean didn't get very long at it. He was killed with all the stones.
That was your friend.
That was my friend.
But the fall
I showed you that day we were up.
The fall of stones were accidental. It wasn't due to the blasting.
No. They came down the fell off the rock face.
Yeah. That had a severe effect on you, hadn't it?
I didn't.
You still feel it.
Oh, I we were up that day, blew in the whistle, I felt it.
Yeah. A number of other people were killed.
There was 4 anyway, I know.
4 more. There's one.
Paddy Esther's father was killed in it. Archie Carnlough, he was the other boy. There's another one.
I don't know.
There was
Archie Carnlough was killed, big man, he was killed with a stone like an egg.
Was that from the blasting?
No, fair
It's fall.
A fall as well?
Aye.
Right. Well, was anybody actually killed as a result of the blasting?
No. Not to my knowledge.
No, I never know that.
Not to my knowledge.
But there were plenty of accidents on the trolleys or the buggies.
Oh, God, I've been nice on the buggies. They went down their field and they came down, with the foot of the brae, we called it. You know that back we showed you with the wagons turned round. We went down there one day and ended up in the field on the left-hand side.
And how did they keep children off those?
Admittedly,
you were children.
I never seemed to see much bother with children, you know. That's true.
The only time you went up the railroad was on a Sunday.
On a Sunday, yeah, Saturday and Sunday.
So then,
You're right.
in summary, once it had gone to the crushing mill, the flints were extracted, the crushed limestone was at a powder at that stage.
That's the powder, some
Powder. And it then went on to the quay,
Aye.
which, and these boats. Who had the contract for the limestone?
Culvers. Culvers in Glasgow, steel firms in Glasgow.
Were the boats?
That's where it all went to.
I thought at one stage the boats were Dutch. Did you say?
They were not
Oh,
the
yeah.
last 3 boats came in.
They were in contract.
They were contracted in. But they still went to Culvers.
And what was the purpose of this? Why was the lime so important to the ironworks?
They used the lime, they said, as a hardening agent in the steel, so I kind of make sense of that.
Which part of England?
Flux for the help to separate the clay and all out of the ore,
Yeah.
and you get the pure iron.
Which part of England did you serve?
Glasgow, I think it was.
It was Glasgow, aye.
Glasgow.
Culver Steelworks,
Glasgow.
well.
Yeah.
Big business, Culver Steelworks.
Right.
Culver's steel plant.
But then they made a lot of chicken grit too.
Aye.
The flints and the limestone was mixed together and into this very small grit for the chickens. That was all bagged and sold.
And then they burnt the lime out we earlier on. The cows was up there. There must be a photo of the cows in that book somewhere.
Yeah.
There's 3 cows or 4 cows.
4, I think.
4 of them.
4
But you still have one now. There's one outside the door here, isn't
There
there?
is, yeah.
That's the old one.
That's the
This
first
was
one.
4 back ones.
Yeah.
Where a man lost his knife in it. He fell into one of the
Oh, I
cows.
remember you said they fell into it.
Yeah.
Where stones stuck where there were stones was going in, and he and up, the stone was stuck in it. Was nice to have it, and he fell in.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the death that would be.
Oh, aye. But
He was even actually born in needle club.
So just to tie in with the German Peat works, it had ceased work when you people arrived. It stopped in 1900.
it stopped at the beginning of the First World War
And
because the
was there
Germans had to go out of the country.
Was there anything left of it?
Peat works, the lighthouse is still there.
Yeah. Anyway, that's not our brief, but just when we're dealing with the photograph, there was a youth hostel there,
Yes, not
That's part of it.
and you knew the person who was in charge of it.
Well, there's this man here. This man here would know about that.
Bernie Donnelly was the warden of the youth hostel from 1937.
Oh, that would be before Davies.
These are your notes until 1941. His wife died when she had to give it up. William McKeegan.
That's my uncle.
Aye.
That's your
That was
uncle.
the
He
blind
was a
man.
blind man.
Yeah.
Uncle Willie and his wife
He was
Mary.
blind,
He was
He was
blind,
blind, yeah.
Blind man, yes.
and he acted as a warden in the youth hostel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Him and his wife.
See, this is broadening into the history of Carnlough, which is only going to be forgotten if we don't record it. And then there was Robert Abram.
Abram, that's,
Yeah. He
He
lived in the house up, further up.
You're described as his workmate. 1951 to 66.
Uh,
I think that's worth mentioning is we talked about flints there. There was a plant, Carnlough, they called it the flint plant. It's only every so often a bit of rake and maybe 6 wagons of flints, and they went down into the flint mill. And that flint mill killed more men. 4 or 5 died with. You know, it's still the closest the miners' takes, that's what they call it.
Oh, right, the dust from it.
And there's
Yeah.
4 or 5 other men died over the years.
I just got rid of
It was
that.
just dust.
Everybody that worked on it
And
was
that worked.
affected. Aye.
For I remember looking in and there's an old coal bag just split over the top of
Yeah.
it, tied around the waist, and all you just seen was the shadows and the dust.
But
And then men all had got a bad death.
there were so many things in those days, even people scutching, the dust in the scutch. But funnily enough, there weren't all that many people bad
The
at it.
flint grit, you see, was a hard grit.
Yeah.
McCollum, what do you call him? He was a champion runner.
At Paddy McCullough,
Paddy McCollum.
Paddy,
Clark's and John Hine.
He went down with it.
And,
Always a terrible place. You look down them Kirk Riders. Just you see them as a dark shadow.
Now, from the harbour point of view, tell us about the boats that came in there.
There's a tougher come in, but the Hans and the Great Two, the Dutch boats,
They were all Dutch for some reason or other.
well, I suppose they're
They were cheap, and Well, they're late drafted,
Late drafted,
because Carnlough Harbour never could get any
Yes,
depth in it.
actually, that's a good point because Holland is
Yeah.
very shallow.
Aye. Aye, the coal boats are all very deep, the bunkers here there.
And there were 5 of these boats, is that right?
No, two of them.
Two of them.
Two.
The
Every,
Hollands
there
were
was
red.
5 boats, 5 boatloads went out every week.
Well,
Aye.
it was just like a ferry service.
Aye.
They just straight over, discharged to a bag and
Yeah.
filled up the bag. A lot of the Glasgow people used to use it as a ferry when going to come to holiday time.
Yeah.
The one good thing came out of that, a lot of the Carnlough men got women. Or the Carnlough women got men, I should say.
All right. Robert, what were your duties?
Well, basically maintenance, mechanical maintenance of basically.
After these guys had broken all the wagons?
They broke it, we had to fix it, yeah. But we also did all the new construction work and stuff like that. I built a new plant up in the quarry. Actually, I have a drawing of it here.
Right.
I just,
If you're sure, we'll take a photograph of it and get a better one.
it was built, well, a couple of years before I left.
The mill really had a very good workshop.
They had a very good, yes,
What
they had a very,
two blacksmiths and a couple of fitters
yeah,
and 2 joiners.
they built their own railway wagons, the chassis, everything.
Mm-hmm.
And all the ends for the cables he's talking about, that they
It's based on
the blacksmiths made them, and they were fitted to the ends of the ropes, you know, for the end
This is
line.
where they were broken coupling these wire ropes was
Yeah.
quite a problem.
They made them all themselves. There was a lot of, my job was mostly, as I say, building different, we built a crushing plant. And then we did a lot of stuff at the harbour. They built a big storage bin, and we had a manager there, what was his name? Rolson.
Oh, I also know.
Donny Rolson,
That's
a Scotsman, and he was really interested in modifying everything, so he got to build a bin at the harbour, a storage bin. And then he asked me about making a telescopic thing that could go out over the harbour rather than use the old chutes that they had for years and years. And that was fine, we built it all up, and then one day he came along and he says, we'll give her a try, Robert. I said, well, yeah, okay, but there's no boats in or anything. No, we'll just give her a wee test, see how it works. So we fired it up, and then he said to one of the workers, he said, to open the chute, which I thought was a bad thing to do. They opened the chute, but whatever happened, the chute jammed, and he put about, I don't know, a few ton of stones into the harbour before we get it shut down.
Right.
Then he had to bring the dredger in and dredge it all back out again. But
How did you get it from the wagons up into the hopper?
well, that's a good point. Now he built a, we called it a yo-yo. It was a big drum, basically about the diameter of this room nearly. Didn't you ever see
Oh, I
it?
remember seeing it, yeah.
And the wagon went into it.
Oh, and
And
it
you put
rotated. It rotated.
Yes, you put these big bars in along the top of the wagon to keep the wagon from falling over. And then you rotated it with a winch.
Right.
And the winch would rotate and tip it up. All the stuff would run out. Apparently, Mr. Rolson, he had ordered this thing from Cade's Foundry in Larne. And we tried it, but the problem with it was that they operated with a winch to rotate it. It was on big rollers. But when you were bringing it back down again, you never could get the rails to line up properly. So they'd have to keep doing it back and forward, and it was really not very practical. And he said he had another one ordered. Apparently they used these somewhere in some coal mines he'd worked at. So I had suggested to him, why don't we just make a hydraulic one? So I designed a hydraulic one with two big arms that come up underneath and catches the axle and tips it up that way.
Yeah.
There is photographs somewhere about, I have a photograph here of it actually,
Yeah.
somewhere in here I can show you it. But it worked reasonably well, as far as I know, because I left then not that long after that. But no, he did a lot of stuff, so he had to cancel the other one. He didn't want another yo-yo, as we called it.
So it was very labour intensive at that.
Oh, it would be, yes, oh yeah.
How many people do you reckon you worked at the harbour and worked in the mines?
We've been about 6 in the
And then Quarryhead alone.
because you had to manhandle the wagons onto the chutes,
Yeah,
and then they tipped up then.
yeah.
Good. You mentioned the horn there. Was there a factory horn that went a
Oh
different?
yes, a steam horn.
What time did it go in the days?
8 and 5, wasn't
I
it?
8 and 5.
The workers had to be there at 8.
Yeah.
I have the actual horn,
Have you?
Yeah.
yes. I don't have it with me, but I do have it. at
What
home.
was it, an air horn or
Oh no, steam.
Yeah, originally it was steam, and then way back in the early 50s, my father was involved in the transforming it from steam to electric,
Right.
and he fitted the winch up at the kilns that winched the wagons up. He fitted it with electric motor rather than the steam engine.
Yeah.
And at that point, they did away with the main. Everything was driven with one large steam engine. It was a Carnlough compound engine, a massive
Twin cylinder.
twin cylinder, yeah, a big flywheel.
Well, the flywheel had been the size
about
of
20 foot high,
Aye.
and that drive the whole plant. Everything had line shafts going all over the whole mill. Even the workshop, everything was driven from that one engine.
Well, initially, was it coal driven?
Oh yes, coal filled a big
And the
chimney.
coal would have been brought in by
Yeah.
the boats that
Yeah,
were taking the
boats.
lime
There's
out.
a coal yard down at the harbour as
Yeah.
well.
Yes, there was a yard beside us here
Ah,
with the steam coal.
just
the
that.
coal for the mill itself.
That's right.
That's a different coal to the domestic coal.
That's correct, yeah.
Right.
But when I remember as a boy going over with my dad's lunch, you know, and I used to love to go over into the engine room because I loved the smell of the steam, and it was lovely and warm in there.
Like the steam trains.
I've been hooked on that stuff ever since.
Well, Christy knew.
Christy knew, that's
He
right.
was the
He was the
engine
man who
man.
looked after it.
I remember at the end of the war, or when the peace was declared, Christy went up into the mill about 8 o'clock at night and stooped up the horn, blew it on all night.
Kept you all awake.
No, when the place later, as I say, it was an electric horn, and actually I actually have an electric one. And it still works, I tried it
Aye.
last week.
Well, the farmers in Liberty used that as a time clock.
Aye, because you could hear it over the whole village.
Oh, why, you'd have heard it miles
You hear
away.
it everywhere.
But then, John, your job ended in 1962
Yes.
in the quarry. But the quarry went on for a while afterwards, didn't it?
I not very long, no.
Or was it just demolition of machinery and that sort of thing?
That was it.
Were you involved in that, Robert?
What's that?
When the line stopped,
Yes.
the demolition of the rest of all the machinery in the mills.
No. I left in '62 and joined the Merchant Navy as an engineer
Yeah.
on a ship running from London to Japan, so it closed down when I was away.
Yeah.
town of Carnlough has come a dreadful fate. It would break the heart of any bard this sad tale to relate. It concerns our local lime works where once the industry boomed, but now they may at time the end their fate that has been doomed. No more down from the quarry will see the wagons come. The Dutch boats they must move away and find another run. And Henry, Jack and Billy, Danny, Sean and Hugh must rocket up the high street and join the long, long queue. Their crusher, diggers, dumpers, on which they spent so much, now lie in cold abandon, so sadly out of touch. Many a year and many a day this plant had seen them through, and these workers, like the rest of us, must join that same long queue. In among the limestone where the drillers you could see, there just remains a memory of days that used to be, of cold and rain, of wind and heat, of friendships fond and true. Now Paddy and Robert, Jimmy and John must join the long, long queue. Now that my story is finished, I'm sure you will agree that fate has hit us badly and left us feeling blue. No more we'll hear the old mill horn or see the boats bring in the coal. All we can do is join that queue that leads us to the
Dole.
That's it, you got it.
Very good. Very, very good. And then was it all sold off?
Yes. When I was at sea at that time, they sold it off, and there was a man from somewhere in County Down, a quarryman called Hampton, and he bought the NCK digger that they had here, and he was opening a quarry at up Leganeel, Horseshoe Bend in Belfast. And my father, he talked me into coming home and do a little work for them to build this new plant up at Leganeel.
Yeah.
We did that, went up there and we started work. I didn't really want to leave sea at that time, but I decided, they talked me into it anyway. And we'd built a lot of the stuff and we were putting the foundations in, and there was some concrete to be delivered, and it was a bit late, so we phoned up to say the concrete hadn't come. And the man at made the concrete said that Mr. Hampton cancelled it. This was the older guy. He was the uncle of the other guy that did most of the organising. He had cancelled it, so the young boy came and he says, "Have you not got the concrete yet?" I said, "No, it's been cancelled by your uncle." Oh dear. So the uncle then arrived shortly after that, and apparently there was a dispute over the mineral rights on the area and they had to shut down. So that was me out of a job then. He said, "Well, we maybe shut down for 5 months." I said, "Well, I won't be back." But they did actually build the quarry, I think, since that.
John, when you left, you went to work.
I went to work in the same job as what was at, me and Robert,
Up at, where was Mollusker, where was it?
Miller's mixing factory. And we're out drilling and blasting there for about 3 or 4 years.
Why was there so much blasting to do?
Well, I had to go into, I was all on the one level, the mixing factory at Miller's.
Yeah?
I don't know why, because I only went 3 or 4 years and the work was done at that place. And it had to be leveled down 25 foot to another level. So they brought on this big drill out of Miller's quarry, big wagons, and they drilled 25 foot holes. And we were along, the two boys was blasting it.
Yeah.
And we left here in the morning, so went job, oh, terrible hours. We left here in the morning at 7:15. We worked at 8:15 there. So we were only home at 9:15, that was the hours we go.
Yeah.
Hated it. And we were there for that job and we had to stay there, just hardly doing anything all day. Me and my friend Robert.
Coming back to the harbour now, quite a bit of work had been done there over the years.
Well, they remade it apparently. They took away the North Pier and rebuilt the North Pier.
Yeah, that was in your time, was it?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And then there was a sill outside, a rock, that had to be removed.
Oh, I think it's still there, isn't it?
Ah, still there, but it's,
I remember you, if you got a keel, you didn't.
Oh, you
didn't
wouldn't get
you
over
didn't
it.
come in
then.
at all.
No.
In those days, I only drew about 2 feet. Now I draw about 6 foot. Did you get any little puffers that you would see up on the islands in Scotland?
Oh yes.
Same name, I know.
Oh,
We're looking at the start or something.
there's two companies there. The lights.
oh, it's him.
There's one company that's all lights, Starlight, Moonlight,
That's
Polar Light. Then the
Dawn Light.
aye.
Dawn Light together.
Then there was the tribes, the Kaffir, the Zulu, what was it? Spartan.
These little puffers were marvellous things for the islands because they could load up with coal, they could go up to a beach, dry out on the beach, and then people would come out with a horse and cart.
Oh yes.
To,
I'm trying to think. Does somebody know who the pilot was when the peridot was lost?
which was lost?
The peridot. And she came into the bay. The weather was very rough, and the pilot wasn't available. So the captain decided then to go up to Larne, and she perished on the Scarnacan rocks at Larne
Was this the
Harbour.
intention to come into Carnlough?
Yeah, it was due for Carnlough.
It's not a good place in the
An easterly, it's not a good place. But the pilot said afterwards he would have brought her in if it had been there, but just he was always engaged at the time when she came into the bay. And the captain decided to go on to Larnoch instead. Tried to shelter in Larnoch.
And where did he find her up there?
Carnacan Point.
That's
That'd be Ella McGee, wasn't it?
He turned in too soon, did he?
I don't know what happened to him, but every man was lost.
My goodness. Was Carnlough a recognised fishing port?
No.
No really for herring, you know.
No.
Nobody really fished cod or anything.
Well,
Mackerel. I mean commercially, not.
Well, my father was a commercial fisherman. David was a commercial, but it was mostly Atlantic salmon.
Like way, you know.
But well, in those days, you weren't fishing prawns though.
No prawns here, no. You go to
Scotland.
the Clyde.
Yeah. It's a fantastic privilege to be in this area here because I've been sailing all my life and it's just it's marvellous. You can nip over to Port Patrick there and Campbelltown, the Clyde, everywhere. What brought this to me? Well, as a young doctor in Brisbane, and I looked after the old people's home. This was 1960s, and there was an old boy there who had worked with Marconi, an old man called Johnson. Yes. He worked with Marconi in 1898 on Rathlin, at that stage. And I remember thinking, I'll get him again. In those days I didn't have all this cameras and things. But I've always regretted missing that, an interview. If we do interviews with people up at home, John Wright. John Wright served his time down. There was a wheelwright down here.
Oh yes. What do you call it? He lived in Strictly.
James McNeil, the hardware in Brisbane, he chartered him to build a cart right from scratch.
Yes.
And each week I would go out at each stage he was doing it and talk. The skill of that man was amazing, and yet he hadn't made carts for about 30 years. He didn't have any fancy tools, he made his own things.
Mm-hmm.
He was able to, making the wheel was fantastic, craft. I mean, he had finished the wheel, it could sit up on its own.
I just bouncing on the rim.
And then he left a space to put the hoop on. And we went over to Toome Bridge, there's McKee's over there, and they hooped.
Yeah.
Heat the hoop and put it on. But that's the sort of thing we're interested in doing.
But there's still a concrete slab at the foot of Drummoran where the Mackays hooked the wheels.
Alright.
I remember.
Devils.
I
Yeah.
remember Alec telling me his father and his uncle with hooked wheels on it.
Aye.
Well, I'd like to thank all you guys for coming along and talking, because if you don't do it, nobody else is going to do it.
In this land of hills and valleys, there is beauty rich and rare, that delights the eyes of many who have cause to linger there, as they gaze in silent wonder at this beauty all around. In our village by the seaside, where the hills come sweeping down. Lovely village by the seaside, so beloved by one and all. There's a kind word warmly spoken, and a friend to hear our call. We may travel many countries, see the sights and make new friends. We'll return again to Carnlough, our dear home among the glens. We can see the hills of Scotland when the weather's clear and bright, and the maiden's lighthouse flashing to warn sailors in the night. Our lovely sandy seashore, so enjoyed by young and old, in the summer warm and peaceful, and in winter wild and cold. Lovely village by the seaside, so beloved by one and all. There's a kind word warmly spoken, and a friend to hear our call. We may travel many countries, see the sights and make new friends. We will return again to Carnlough, our dear home among the glens.